Yay! What is up, everyone? Thanks so much for joining another live stream on our VS Code channel. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on whatever time zone that you're in. Really excited about today. But before I even mention what we're going to be chatting about, let's please go ahead and do our thing that we do on Thursdays, that Throwback TikTok.
C# in VS Code? Let's check it out. In extensions, search for C# Dev Kit. When you install it, you can go through the walkthrough to get set up so you can start using the awesome integrated features like IntelliCode, package management, test discovery, and yes, you've got a solution explorer now in VS Code. Try it out and let us know what you think.
All the C# lovers out there are going to appreciate that C# Dev Kit. So if you do use C# .NET, drop a comment. Let us know how that's going for you if you experimented with the Dev Kit. Hello, Tashiko Moto Girl. Good morning to CG Namely. Thanks for joining, you guys. It's going to be a packed, fun stream today. There's more than one person that I'm going to be interviewing. So let's go ahead and jump right in and welcome Kyle and Jen from Veracode.
Hi, Reynald.
Hi.
Yay, Kyle and Jen. So I didn't want to butcher either of your names, and I didn't get to ask you before. I don't care when people are butchering my name. So Kyle, let me try to guess the pronunciation of your last name. Is it Metivier?
Pretty close. And also, technically, having grown up with that last name, I answer to anything that starts with M. So well done. My grandmother would say Metivier, the French pronunciation, but Metivier is generally how we go about it.
I should have tried with the French because actually my name is French. It's Reynald Adolphe, but I always just say Ray if you're struggling with that, or Reynald. Okay, and so Jen, your last name's French too, Martineau.
Yeah, there you go. That was actually really good. Yeah.
Well, now that I'm thinking French from the French perspective, now I'm a little bit more educated with my assumptions.
Do you speak French?
Oui, c'était ma première langue.
Oh,
Yes.
moi aussi, je parle en français.
Okay. Anybody in the chat, if we want to do the whole stream in French, let us know. If the majority will win, we'll do something special. Then I'll get it.
Then we'll have to translate for me.
Yeah. Okay. So, both of you are from Veracode. Tell us what Veracode is and what are we in for today?
Sure. So my guess is that there's a portion of folks out there who are familiar with Veracode, using it at your organization. Some are probably a little familiar with the name, but for a good portion of you, this is a net new word. So what Veracode is a global leader in application risk management for the AI era. Our various scanning and remediation tools are powered by what we learned from trillions of lines of code scans and applied to a proprietary AI-assisted remediation engine. Our platform's trusted by organizations to build and maintain secure software from code creation to cloud deployment. And what that means is that we offer a suite of tools connected through a platform and a number of integrations that empower developers to get accurate, actionable visibility of exploitable risk to achieve real-time remediation results and reduce security debt at scale.
All right, so lots of fancy words there. So basically, it just has to be. It's about reducing security risks, right?
Yeah, I mean,
what's like an example of like something Veracode could like protect us from? Are we talking about like Trojan horse stuff like that? Like, what's an example that you saw that just for the people that are new, because a lot of us just come in and we get specs to like code and yeah, we try to be secure, but a lot of times that's like lower priority. So like,
right.
What's some stuff that we could like say, hey, to our manager, we should like look at this Veracode because it could help us protect us from like this bug, and the manager didn't come from a programming background. So like, how would they explain it?
So there are a lot of ways that Veracode can help an organization. We utilize software composition analysis to identify vulnerable open source libraries and let developers then know what's the next safe version they could upgrade to. That's one example. We also utilize static analysis, which can identify flaw patterns within code. So this is actually scanning your code and looking for flaws, like we'll probably show an example of a SQL injection later, something like that.
Okay.
And we can identify those, let you know where they are, what the data paths that are at risk, and also how to fix that, up to and including directions on how to fix it or guidance, or an actual code remediation suggestion.
Got it. All right. Well, Jen, was there anything you were about to jump in to say before we get started?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think, it's great to know where your flaws and your vulnerabilities are in your code, but it's really like, how do you remediate it, right? Because there's a lot of tools out there that'll tell you, hey, you have a problem here on this line, you need to fix this. But how do you actually fix that? And I think that's where we come in. We want to fix your code and we want to make sure it's secure when it hits production. You don't have to worry about anyone exploiting, doing anything bad. So that's where Veracode comes in, and that's where we shine.
Nice. All right, cool. Excited to check it out then. By the way, so one quick question, like how was it even born? Like who was it that decided, hey, these other tools aren't really doing this. Why don't I invent Veracode? Who started Veracode? Was it like, can you tell us about like the origin?
Sure. So Veracode started in the mid 2000s and was founded by Chris Wysopal, who was one of the early hacktivists who was telling, one of the first people interviewed by Congress to identify how dangerous software flaws or network flaws could be sort of in the larger context of how it impacts us all. They developed initially the static scanning technology that I briefly discussed, which is looking for those flaws within code so that you can write it more securely and it's no longer exploitable.
Got it.
Before
All
that, really wasn't a technology that did that. So it wasn't necessarily about these tools weren't doing this. There weren't tools to do this when they started.
Okay. Cool. Well, let's go ahead and do this then.
All right, let's show you the extension. All right, so this is my screen. This is my computer. I just got a random project off of GitHub. So it's called Vulnerabilities, and it's especially vulnerable. And this is really to show you how this extension would work in real life. And so if you're a Veracode customer right now, you can head to Marketplace, just search for Veracode, and you can install it yourself. But mainly, I've already installed it. It's the 01 here that you can see. And as you can see, it's fairly straightforward. What we were trying to do is really create an extension. Yeah.
Sorry, before you move on, can you click on the extension tab so we could see the extension itself?
Absolutely. There it is right here.
Just in case there's others with similar names. So it's like Veracode scan for vscode. That's what they'd want.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's head back and just X out of that and open this guy up. All right. So yeah, I was saying, this extension is really easy to use, really easy to navigate. And the reason we did that is because we don't want to add extra noise. Developers have a job to do, and that's to, write really good code and have really cool features. And security is usually not at the forefront of your thought process. And as you mentioned, Reynald, it's unfortunately not something that people think of as much as they should. And so what we wanted to do was really create something where you could write something in your IDE and then hit the scan button and check for flaws, vulnerabilities using our scanning technology. And So I'll show you a bit around. So the first part that I want to show you is vulnerabilities in my library. So this is the software composition analysis part of the extension. And what SCA really focuses on is identifying risks that might be introduced by open source components and third-party libraries. And so you'll see here, I have quite a few, and they're all labeled by severity. And so you'll see here that this Jackson bind one, this is a critical library. And so in this code that I'm using in Vulnerado, it's using version 2.9.8. So if I click on it, what it'll do is it'll drop down all of the vulnerabilities within that specific library. So there are a bunch, and they're all critical, which is really bad. So we need to fix that. So there are two ways that you could remediate, because this is really what matters, is by clicking on this view library details. So what this does is, I'm just going to make this panel a little bit bigger so you all can see. So what this does is it shows you just some general information about that specific library. And so you'll see here usage, whether it's transitive or direct. Just direct means that your project is specifically calling out that component, and transitive just means that it's being called by that direct dependency, but it's along for the ride, like you didn't actually add it.
Okay.
And so just some general information here, just about that specific library. If ever you wanted to, you could head to our Veracode vulnerability database. That'll take you out of the IDE. We really wanted to keep as much information within the IDE, and so this is not necessary in order to fix any of the issues that you might see. But if you wanted more information, you're curious, you could always click on that. But what we want to know is we really want to fix that vulnerability. So I'll head to one of them. Yeah.
So by looking at that screen, like, how could I see why it's vulnerable? Like where does it explain it's vulnerable because X? You know what I mean?
That's a great question. Yeah, so you have to head into one of the specific vulnerabilities in order to see why it's vulnerable. And so this is the definition at the top. So you can see why this vulnerability exists. And this is because there's a polymorphic typing issue, because there are more than one association gadget types related to, big long word here. So that's why you can see why this is an issue. And what's cool about it is that if you just scroll down, it just tells you how to fix it. And so this is really what matters to people is, okay, well, I'm using 2.9.8. How do I get rid of this? Well, you have to update your POM XML to be 2.9.10. And that will, once I rescan, fix that specific vulnerability. So, I say simple enough. I'm not a developer, so obviously there probably is some background work that you need to do there. But overall, this is how you would fix that specific vulnerability.
Okay. So like a developer, whether like they're new or senior, right there could just click on like a couple of the nodes right under where you're at and then collect various types of vulnerabilities and then show that to like their managers and be like, this is an example of like some vulnerabilities that are available, and then these are some possible solutions, right? Because then it becomes a little bit clearer. So is that a good approach, or is there like some other way that that's better than what I just said?
Sure. So what would happen in a real world scenario is a developer would write up their code, and then they would scan it and see, that there are these vulnerabilities. They would remediate it directly in their IDE. And then once, as part of the SDLC, once it goes through the pipeline, hopefully you have other gates that would also scan this code that you are committing. And then that's when your managers would technically be made aware that there are specific vulnerabilities or flaws, but hopefully those are remediated and they don't even see them. So all in all, it kind of makes you look good, right? Because you're fixing them way at the beginning. And there's this concept of shifting left, which means that developers have the ability to fix those problems that they see in their code right when they're coding, versus further down the line when their manager would see that there are problems and there's a security issue, and then they have to backtrack, do some rework. So really, in all, it saves companies a lot of money because you don't have any context switching as well.
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah, no, I only mentioned it that way in the context of someone that's not using it. So before SDLC, I haven't heard that like in a while, like from looking at resumes. For anyone that's new out there, software development life cycle,
Life
right?
cycle.
Like just the process of developing from beginning to end. Yeah, so like if someone isn't using a Veracode and they're not going through like the process, but they wanted to show an example of like calling out some vulnerabilities, I was saying that seems like a nice direct way without getting complicated for someone that might not be like a programmer, for them to intuitively understand this is what's bad here,
Right.
and this software is calling it
Yes.
out. It's easy for you to see. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I understand what you mean regarding like, ideally like throughout the life cycle of, coding a project, that in the end, you don't have like too much because it resolved them. So
100%. And as I mentioned, I'm not a developer. And so if I can understand it, I think like the general public can, which is really cool in itself because it is something that is deep rooted in technology and it is security focused. And so a lot of times, like the verbiage that we use and the words, they don't make sense to most people. And so we try to make it as accessible to everyone as possible.
So everyone in the chat, that's like a good way to kind of stand out from some of your other developers that aren't really focused on security. Everyone's like trying to like beat deadlines, but if you like, I would imagine like if I was like a manager, if someone like pointed out potential vulnerabilities and an example of like ways to resolve it, that might make them stand out.
Absolutely.
Just a little mentoring there. This was a mentoring moment. Ding, ding, ding. All right, let's go back to our regularly scheduled program.
All right. Let's head into the other section of the extension, and this is the flaws in my code section. So this is using a static scanner, and I don't know if anyone in the chat is familiar with a source code scanner, something open source like semgrep, but Veracode is a little different. So we scan the completed binary code of an application versus the source code. And so what that does is it allows for more depth and there's less false positives, which is one of the things that is most important because your scan can go fast, right? It can scan in 30 seconds or so in a minute. But if it's not giving you the right results and you end up spending a lot of time fixing things that you don't really need to fix, what's the point? So, a lot of people will say that a binary scan is a little slower, but we just might argue that that slowness gives you the right results, which ends up saving you a lot of time and money.
Okay, makes sense.
So let's go into the specifics of the extension. So you'll see little blue dots. So I'm not going to talk about those because those are the AI specific tool that we do have called Veracode Fix, and Kyle is going to go into more detail about it. So we'll really just focus on this list. So you'll see a whole list of items that are wrong. They're flaws that are in my code. And so what I can do is I have two ways of interacting with the extension at this point. I can go into my code editor, I can scroll through and I can see some underlines. If I hover over that underline, I get a hover with all the information that I might need to remediate it. You don't have to read it. We'll go into more detail when we look at one specific example. But this is one way to interact with the extension instead of having to use this left panel. Which is kind of cool. And just for people that are interested in VS Code development, we are using language server protocol under the hood. And so this LSP is what is adding these nice squiggly lines, and it's what's helping us actually show these results. So that's a little tidbit on the development of the plugin. And so if I open one of these flaw details panel, let's just go on this one, this very high flaw here. I'll just make this a little bigger so you can see again. And so like the vulnerability part of it, you have the description. And so this is just a general description of the specific flaw. So this is an OS command injection. So some of you might be familiar with that. And what we really care about, though, is this remediation guidance. So it's how do you actually fix this? And what steps do you have to take in order to make sure that this disappears from your code? And so you would read this as a developer and make sure that you go through the steps and you remediate it. But we have a better way. And so that's why I'm not going to spend too much time on this, because I think Veracode Fix and what Kyle will show you that there is a faster and more efficient way to remediate. But just all in all, if you weren't using our AI tool, then you would read this remediation guidance, you would apply it, pardon me, to your code, and you would be able to fix that flaw.
All right.
So any other questions before we dive into the AI stuff?
No, I was just going to remind the chat. If there's any questions you guys have, please go ahead and drop them in the chat. Okay, here's one. Does it work for any language and platform?
So we do have, oh, go ahead, Kyle.
I was going to say, we can share the documentation for the language coverage across the static scanning and the SCA. Veracode Fix, which we'll talk about in a second, also covers a subset of those languages, but it's safe to say that it's the most popular and the most common programming languages. And the reason that I don't know it off the top of my head is because it is very, very long.
Okay. Cool. Thanks, Samuel Garcia, for that question. Let's see here. Any other questions? No, so let's continue.
So just an example, Jen is sharing a Java known vulnerable application. And when we switch over to my screen, I'll share a JavaScript, and we're also going to work in Python, just as examples of what we'll cover today.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is pick up a little bit where Jen left off, but I'm in a different known vulnerable application because we did want to show a little bit of our coverage that we're offering. That was a Java app. This is JavaScript. And I have pulled up a scan that's already completed. And there are some identifiers that there are flaws within this code. I've also grabbed a CWE 78 OS command injection. And as you can see here, there is remediation guidance that as a developer, somebody could try and understand and follow and fix this code. But as we mentioned, where there is a blue dot, that indicates that there's a Veracode Fix suggestion available. What that means is that we're going to send the results of this scan alongside a body of the code back to our machine learning backend. And it's going to choose from a Veracode created reference patch that is then customized to fit within this target code or whoever's using it. And what that ends up looking like is a return of a couple of options between 1 and 5. In this 78 example, we've only gotten 2 back, and it returns it in a unified diff format. It's going to let us know what Veracode Fix is suggesting to take out and what it's suggesting to add in. Now, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's okay. So it's got a diff, kind of like when we're using Git, right?
Yep, that's exactly what it is, a Git diff.
So you mentioned like the OS command injection. Is that like the most popular type of vulnerabilities now? Like I know back in the day you used to hear about like the SQL injections. Is that the thing that people, is that what the kids are doing nowadays?
I mean, I hope not. just as much as I hope that there aren't a lot of SQL injections out there, I think that the OS command injection, because of its criticality, is a great example to show of what we're able to capture and what we're able to fix. But as far as the most common flaws within, that really depends on the language. Now, within JavaScript, 78 is amongst the top 10, as is 89, 601, and 614. And I know that because we target the most common vulnerabilities or the most common flaws within each language for fix. So that means that the 10 most common CWEs, and that's how we cover that. A CWE, for anybody out there who might not know, it's a common weakness enumerator, and it's just a way that we're able to number and categorize these flaws. And these are universal, outside of Veracode, and kept handy by MITRE.
Interesting. Okay, good. That's good to know, actually. So those are like standards, I guess, in the security industry or something?
Exactly. This is a list that's maintained by MITRE, and all security companies and organizations are able to reference it. So we have a common language around these types of flaws.
Who's MITRE? Is that like the equivalent of like the web organization, like
MITRE's like a quasi-governmental agency. I believe that they are private, but have some level of public interest.
Got it. All right, cool.
They keep us safe.
Yeah, they do. MITRE keeps us safe.
They keep us safe. Yeah.
They're the Food and Drug Administration for code, I guess. Right. All right.
Now, so we've shared a little bit about how we're identifying and giving developers a lot of information about what's wrong with their code, which I know a couple of developers, they don't always appreciate. But alongside this, what we're going to try and do is offer the solutions to that without them having to do an awful lot of work. So we've recommended these code changes, and what we can do moving forward here is just apply this fix. It's been put in there, and then we can be, prompted to rescan. We can compile this. We can see if there's anything that we need to change in order for these modifications to work up or downstream, because of course we're only working within one file here. But what I really wanted to sort of get into after we shared, what Fix is and how it works here, is to talk about how we are utilizing the focus of security with Gen AI versus how some of the code generator tools out there are focusing on ways to increase productivity for developers or make things easier for developers to learn or use. We think these are phenomenal technologies, and people are becoming more productive and more capable because of them. But we're also finding that the code that they generate isn't necessarily the cleanest or the most secure. In around 40% of examples that code generator tools are providing, there's flawed code. So what that means is there need to be some guardrails around how we use these types of technologies. And the best way that I found to show those examples is to ask Copilot over and over again to fix the flaws in my code. Now, in a lot of situations, it's going to do a pretty good job. But, and as I can share across a couple of instances, and what I've done here is open a bunch of VS Code screens in a couple of applications, two different ones, a Python one you're looking at here, and then that JavaScript one that we were looking at before. You'll see that Copilot is identifying some of the big problems. But across these instances, and in this one specifically, it didn't catch both of them. It just grabbed the SQL injection without grabbing the OS injection, which is actually a higher criticality. And then in another one, we can take a look, and it will have grabbed that SQL injection and then make a recommendation about the OS command injection, but it hasn't identified it or given you a way to fix it. So these tools are really advanced, and they're powerful ways to give developers a leg up on getting code out there. But the consistency of security and code quality are still at a place where there are some important guardrails, because if you thought that you were working with Copilot and it was able to tell you where the flaws were in your code and how to fix that, you would ask this question and then you'd move on. And what would happen is that situation you described earlier, where a couple of days from now or a week, once this tries to merge to main and the pipeline fails, you're going to get that ticket from your manager, and then you'll have that conversation. We're trying to prevent that altogether.
Got it. So when someone's like working, let's say in sprints, should they be running a scan like right before they push their code up, or should they be running a scan like at the end of each day before they leave? But the ultimate, yeah, like should they be doing it? How often should they be running the scan versus like just doing it like
I think
right when it's at the very end of the
Yeah, I feel like that a developer is going to find a pace that works best for them. The beauty of what we're showing here is that you could do this multiple times a day. Every time you add something that you think might be worth scanning, and it's going to take, this takes 35 seconds to complete a scan. We've pre-populated these just because, we didn't want to wait those 35 seconds and figure out how to kill that across 5 different applications here. But a developer should be able to do this as many times as they want, but certainly, as you mentioned, before you're going to push anything to main, save yourself the hassle of context switching back to something you no longer want to work on.
Cool. All right.
And then what I was just going to show in addition to that, because, I'm calling out Copilot for being a little bit inconsistent, and because I love Copilot so much, I don't want to say it's not a good, smart thing to use, because it is. But the consistency that we're able to deliver from the way that we're using Gen AI is the difference here. And this is a different application of the same type of technology. But what we're not doing is asking ours to be security aware. We've created a human developed set of known good code examples that our AI is simply, modifying to fit within whatever that target code is.
So when you say it's a good idea, if someone's using this, to use it in conjunction with Copilot, especially if there's like information that's being said here, and and Copilot could elaborate on it more, so you get like your understanding.
Absolutely. I mean, this tool alongside Copilot means that you can use Copilot as much as you want to. Use it to create whatever would be tedious and difficult for you to do. And without having direct knowledge of that code, you can scan it and you can correct any flaws within it. And then you can pass it forward with high assurance and confidence, right? Because most of the developers I talk to really like the code that's generated, but they still feel like they have to go through it line by line by line to make sure that it's doing what it says that it's going to do. If you have a tool that can provide that type of assurance for you, it's going to save you a lot of time and actually, add to the promise of productivity that these tools are, giving us.
Got it. All right. Cool.
Thanks.
And if you look at the difference, right, it's like what I showed with the remediation guidance and then Kyle just pressing a button. There's a huge time, there's some, you get to spend your time on something that's way more productive, and you don't have to go through this remediation advice and make sure that it makes sense and then rescan and see if it fixed it. You just click a button and, boom, there it is.
Yeah. I mean, in a lot of these situations, and I'm not advocating for this necessarily, but it will be a lot faster to just click the apply fix button than it would be to even read the definition of the CWE.
Which is probably what most people are going to end up doing anyway. They
That is
just want to
exactly
move
what
on.
they do. I just can't tell them to.
We don't advocate for that.
Now, imagine this is something that you want to do like before your thorough testing, right?
Yeah, before you are going to merge this to any pipeline where it's interacting with additional code or where it's merging, into a main code branch, you're going to want to test for these types of things. because as we've mentioned previously, it just becomes more expensive and annoying to deal with it later. And it will be found, right? Somewhere along any decent SDLC towards deployment, these are going to be discovered. It's going to be a lot easier for you to deal with it right now while you're developing this code than coming back to it when it's trying to merge and blocking a deployment.
Are there different versions that you're releasing like frequently, or how does that work?
So it's not necessarily different versions that we're releasing here so much as we're continuing to expand our language coverage and the CWEs that we cover within that. So we're not promising to fix every flaw in code. What we can promise to do is fix the most common in the most common languages. So as we mentioned, there's a really long list that our static analysis scanning technology covers. For Veracode Fix, that list is a little bit shorter. We're working, and I think I might have it up here. Yeah, I do. Okay, so we're working with C#.NET, Go, Golang, Java, JavaScript, TypeScript, Kotlin, PHP, Python, and Scala. And these are the CWEs within each of those languages that we cover, which is why I don't remember all of it off the top of my head.
What about code related to databases like scripts? Like, do you guys cover that, or it's focused mainly on just raw programming code?
It's raw programming code, but if that script is embedded within the code and is potentially exposing something like connected in a data path to a SQL injection, that would be identified.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Nice.
What else came out?
What else? Well, I thought it might be fun as we're talking about this to go through and look at a couple of these suggestions. Now, CWE 89 is a SQL injection, and I'm wondering if any of the developers out there might want to take a look at what this code is doing, ask us any questions, or, we're also really excited to get feedback from this developer community. This IDE integration is a fairly new release for us, about a month or 2 months old at the most. So we're really looking forward to, seeing what questions are out there or what people think so far. And we can also show lots of examples of, this is the way it's suggesting to solve an 89. We have 4 options here. So this is the way that this is working, is that the backend is saying that there isn't one best solution here. A developer looking at this might want option 2, which is just, changing some minor adjustments here and then here, and fix option 4. That means that it's pulling from different reference patches to make sure that the developer has a choice here. But they're also delivered in the order of the most likely to both solve the flaw and then compile without further developer intervention. So I'll be very honest and say that option 1 is usually the one you're going to want to pick.
Got it. Now, how would someone have known that, though, that the sequence from option 1 through 4 is sorted in a particular way? Is that like in your documentation, or?
It is in our documentation, but that's actually a really good thing to have pointed out. And I'm wondering if maybe that's something that we could take as some feedback.
Yeah, like it probably could just mention it in the UI, or if you hovered over one of the options, it it bubbled up and it gave you a short little description. This is probably the most common for X reason or whatever.
That's awesome. Thank you.
That's good feedback. Yeah,
cool.
I agree with that.
And so this is a JavaScript example. I did have open, I've got PyGoat in here somewhere. And this is a Python example, PyGoat. One other thing I did want to show, and I bet any of us who have interacted with the code gen tools have experienced this, is that if you ask it a question or tell it to do something, it is going to do that, whether or not that output is necessarily good or bad, right? We get some pretty wonky answers. In a scenario where Veracode Fix interacts with a flaw that isn't going to give it enough data or detail to provide a trustworthy recommendation, our tool is going to fail and it's going to tell you so. We will not provide you with a code sample that we think is not going to fix the flaw that we've identified. So I know it might be new for a product person to share where a tool is not going to work, but I think it's important to note that we are using a responsible application of Gen AI because there's no room for error when it comes to these types of security recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
We move on to an 89 within this Python example, we're going to get a great result, but we're not going to return a result that might not work.
Okay. And how would someone know, like, if like a month down the line, you guys did update it so that it would return a solution? Are there like update notifications, or how does that work?
So one, I might have been a little bit unclear there. So within this wouldn't necessarily be that we would have to do an update in order to cover this. The reason technically that this isn't able to be tracked by Fix is that within this code example, it's not connecting to enough data for us to understand how best to fix it. There's no way that this code would change in a way that we could do that.
Okay.
So
it's not like now you can't do it, but like in a few months you might. It's like it can't be done because of specific parameters, and most likely that's not going to change.
Exactly. And it's worth noting that the reason is because this is in a known vulnerable code sample. Your vulnerabilities aren't usually in a list one after the other. They're usually within code and connected to things. And that's why it's not giving this recommendation here, because it's outside of where this flaw would normally exist.
Okay.
But where they're in like the usual states, an 89 that can be more programmatically solved, it's able to provide recommendations there.
All right. Well, that's a lot more clear now. I thought it was just something like temporary. You don't have like a fix for it, but it might, later on.
In that example, it might be some of these other CWEs where there is no blue dot. We will often update the CWEs that we cover. So even though in 95, that one we probably could. So in 95, even though we don't cover it now, there could be a scenario in the next couple of weeks or months where we do. That's an update to keep an eye out for.
So it looks like we might have a comment here by Adam. It says, do you not provide a simple monochrome editor TextMate integration as a strategy to prevent the AI bots from being able to replicate VSCode itself? I don't think that's really related to this.
I think it might be asking if there's a direct or CLI interface with Veracode Fix, which is actually available. There is a CLI integration where you can script this into a pipeline, but I'm not sure where a bot could replicate VS Code itself or what that means.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Adam, for that question. Any other questions? Feel free to drop it in the comments, folks. What else, Kyle?
All right, what else? Sometimes I do get a little bit lost for time here because Fix is a really easy tool to use. Kind of the point of it is, hi, here is a flaw. Here is a solution to that flaw. Here's a button that you can press to fix it. And so what's next really is that I can go through a bunch of these examples. I'd love to get some feedback on the results that we're providing. We can also dig into a little bit more detail about, the data set that we've created. This has been designed and developed by Veracode's application security consultants and our security researchers, who are some of the most passionate and credible security experts that I've ever met, that anybody's probably met.
Okay.
And what they've done is develop this data set to specifically answer in each scenario how to solve these flaws within the languages that they're specialists in. So that's really, I think, where our Gen AI application is different, is that we're utilizing a highly specified data set in order to make it work, instead of just tuning a model to do a thing.
Cool. So just one more question before we pivot to our next segment, because we are getting close to the end here. But regarding like the data set, if somebody wanted to learn a little bit more about that, is that just in your documentation, your website? And also regarding this extension, is there like a video? Do you guys like produce like video content about this online or tweet about it? How could someone stay up to date?
I think the best way to stay up to date would be to follow our Veracode homepage, which provides a lot of information around the work that we're doing to identify and solve flaws in the marketplace. We've got some blogs that go out regularly about how we see AI impacting the security space, and also how we're generally working with developers to find these flaws. We produce video content pretty much anytime there's something new, and that'll also be able to be found on our homepage.
Nice. All right. Well, cool. This has been exciting and really fun to look at, especially for a topic that's not talked about often.
We appreciate it.
Yeah,
and we really appreciate everyone like wading through the weeds of security with us. If there are any other questions, Jenna and I aren't all that busy. Please reach out to us directly.
Great. So we'll go ahead and show your socials right before we end. But right now it's time for our lightning round. Are you guys ready for that?
Not at all, but let's go.
Do it.
No,
Is
but
this
go.
cute?
All right, producer, throw that bumper. Do we not have our lightning round bumper? All right, that's fine. Let's go right into the questions. I'll do my own bumper. Dun, 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 lightning round. All right. So I'm going to ask you guys 4 questions, and you just answer first thing that comes to the top of your head. All right. What is your biggest pet peeve? Kyle, you first.
Being late.
Okay. It's a good one. You being late, or like other people being late to meet you?
All of the above.
Jen?
Dirty socks on the floor. Gross.
Oh,
Don't do it.
Anything lying down on the floor, but yeah, definitely for that. That's just like wicked. If you had your first talk show, what would be, if you had a talk show, what would be your first guest? Who would be your first guest? Jen, you first this time?
First guest. Joe Rogan.
Good one. Kyle?
Oh man. Mine would end up being about like cooking and gardening, so it'd probably be Martha Stewart.
Interesting. I actually like her. She's she's very flexible with her personality. Is it GIF or GIF? Kyle?
I like to say GIF just because it really riles folks up.
Okay. Jen?
I try not to say it because I don't know. GIF?
I'm all about GIF, and I'm not changing. So, but I do like your political correct stance. You're like, I don't want to start any controversy.
There's things I just won't say, and that's one of them.
I hear you. All right, last question. What's one VS Code extension you cannot live without? Jen, you first.
I mean, Veracode scan for VS Code. It's the best.
You know what? No, I got no. That's cheating. Take that out. Excluding Veracode, because yeah, you need to say that, otherwise you're gonna lose your job. So take that out.
Yeah.
Besides that,
I mean, I don't code. So for me, I have used a few, and when being Copilot, I hope that Kyle doesn't want to go with Copilot, but that would be my next one.
Okay, that's fine. No, I'm not gonna ding you for both having the same. So, Kyle?
Yeah, mine was going to be Copilot, and for no other reason than I've been spending a ton of time with it for the last couple of weeks, and I really do like using it.
Nice. All right. Well, that was our lightning round, folks. Ding, 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 lightning round. I don't know what happened. We had a nice bumper. I don't know if we lost it due to budget cuts or something. All right. So thanks so much, Kyle and Jen, for doing this. What's your socials that people could reach out to if they need to get a hold of either of you?
I think we shared our LinkedIn's, which will be on there, and then our related socials are available through there.
All right, cool. Our producer will probably pop that up pretty soon. But all right, this has been awesome. And there it is with your LinkedIn. And thanks so much for letting us know and sharing your knowledge about this with Veracode extension, available to make your code more secure using VS Code. All right.
Thanks for having us.
Had a great time.
Awesome.
Bye.
Yeah.
See you guys
Thanks.
later. Bye.